Human beings like to believe that we are creatures of our histories, shaped and sculpted by childhood influences, by the rewards and punishments that once trained us, by the formative traumas we dutifully recount to therapists, and by the habits we accumulated on the slow march to adulthood. For more than a century, psychology itself encouraged that intuition first, through the Freudian conviction that buried memories tug at our behavior like invisible puppet strings, and then through the behaviorist insistence that past reinforcement is destiny. Yet as the 21st century gathered momentum, a growing coalition of cognitive scientists, neuroscientists, and philosophers began to question the one-way determinism of those narratives. Their data pointed to an unsettling but invigorating alternative. We act, decide, hope, persevere, and desist, not because the past pushes us, but because the future pulls us. The headline claim, set out most explicitly in Martin Seligman, Peter Railton, Roy Baumeister, and Chandra Shripada's 2013 manifesto, Navigating into the Future, or Driven by the Past, is that prospection, the mental construction and evaluation of possible tomorrows, is the central operating system of the mind. Memory, emotion, attention, and even perception are recast as servants of an anticipatory engine that forever simulates what might occur next and recruits the body to meet it. The idea that the future is the engine sounds paradoxical only until we reflect on the structure of ordinary awareness. As you read this sentence, you are not merely absorbing the flicker of black shapes on a screen. You are silently guessing which word will arrive next, bracing for the possibility of a joke, a new idea, a challenge. If the next clause defies your expectation, a pulse of surprise ripples through the brain's prediction error circuitry, forcing you to update your internal model of the unfolding narrative. The neuroscientist Carl Friston calls this constant cycle of forecasting and correction the free energy principle. What drives it is not nostalgia for what was, but curiosity about what will be. Functional MRI studies reveal that the brain network most active during idle rests the default mode network, stretching across medial prefrontal, posterior, cingulate, and parietal. Cortices lights up precisely when people envision their personal futures. In one experiment, participants instructed to daydream about next weekend displayed greater default mode activity than those told to revisit last weekend, even though both tasks used episodic memory as raw material. The take-home message is clear: when the mind is free, it flips instinctively toward tomorrow. Prospection explains everyday phenomena that baffled past-centric theories. Consider willpower. A smoker resisting a cigarette in the present sacrifices a small, certain pleasure for the sake of a larger, probabilistic health benefit years away. Classic behaviorism, which measures the strength of a habit by its past reinforcement. History predicts failure after all. The smoker has inhaled thousands of reward-laden puffs, yet large numbers of people quit, often after vividly imagining the future biographies. They prefer running with grandchildren, tasting food, breathing without rasp. Laboratory demonstrations bear this out. When researchers ask dieters to close their eyes and pre-live the scene of stepping onto a scale that finally shows the target number, subjects spontaneously eat fewer calories over the next hour than control participants who daydream about neutral events. Episodic future thinking, the technical name for that sensory-rich. Simulation reduces what economists call delay. Discounting, the mind's tendency to devalue goods that arrive later. In one study, alcohol-dependent adults who practiced daily episodes of future thinking cut their nightly drinks in half within 3 weeks, outperforming those who merely recalled past successes. The future image, not the past memory, carried the motivational voltage. The machinery behind such effects is elegantly economical. Daniel Gilbert and Timothy Wilson have argued that the brain uses a single neural, resource-constructed episodic simulation to do double duty. It stores fragments of the past and recombines them into hypotheses about the future. If memory sometimes distorts, the distortions are best understood as the acceptable cost of imaginative flexibility. You cannot assemble tomorrow from yesterday's Lego bricks without bending them. That reassembly happens in the hippocampus, whose neurons stitch together spatial, emotional, and sensory fragments. The stitched scene is then evaluated in the ventral striatum, where dopamine neurons register how rewarding the imagined outcome would feel. Should the mental movie prove attractive enough, prefrontal areas translate desire into a plan. The cycle is so rapid we rarely notice it, unless a meditation teacher asks us to observe passing thoughts. Prospection is not merely a laboratory curiosity, it organizes daily schedules. Corporate strategy and cultural life. Take the humble weekly team meeting. Many managers devote the ritual to retrospective status updates. What did you finish? What blocked you? What metrics moved? After digesting Seligman's thesis, some firms flipped the script. They begin with a sharp sensory description of what the project will look like. At the same moment next week, the marketing deck is animated, the code branches merge, the prototype boots without errors. Only after describing that destination do they list current obstacles and couple each obstacle to an implementation intention of the form. If X occurs, then we will do Y. The technique, christened MCII by psychologist Gabriele Oettingen, binds wish and reality by a psychological ligament called mental contrasting. Meta-analysis across health, academic, and professional domains find that when a goal is paired with mental contrasting and an if-then plan, attainment probabilities rise by 1/4 to 1/2 depending on baseline difficulty. Weekly horizons work because they keep the imagined reward near enough to feel tactile. The dopamine system discounts little over 7 days. Zoom out to a 1-month horizon and the motivational mechanisms evolve. Physiology can change measurably within 30 days. Fat can drop, vocabulary can expand, a website can launch. For those targets, episodic future thinking proves potent because it fosters what philosopher Derek Parfit called psychological continuity with one's future self. In several clever experiments, Hal Hirschfield and colleagues used age-progressed avatars to show participants a visual image of themselves decades older. The more familiar and sympathetic the aged self felt, the more money subjects diverted to retirement accounts, and the more likely they were to choose healthy snacks. Letters to the future, written at the start of a 30-day challenge and scheduled for automated delivery midway through, mimic that avatar experience. When the email from August U lands in July's inbox, the barrier of temporal distance shrivels. You are being addressed by someone who depends on you. That felt obligation is not guilt, but solidarity. At the 1-year scale, Prospection shades into narrative identity, the ongoing autobiography, through which people maintain a sense of coherence. Developmental psychologists have long observed that adolescents graduate into adulthood when they can relate current setbacks to a preferred life story stretching years ahead. Adults update the storyline each birthday. Narrative identity, according to the Rutgers scholar Janine Singer, is a meaning-making device that binds discrete episodes into a plot that arcs toward valued themes, such as growth, connection, or mastery, imagining a milestone exactly 12 months away, earning a professional credential, opening a business. Releasing an album provides the narrative with a climactic scene. Research on meaning in life shows that the more individuals perceive their daily chores as steps toward a meaningful chapter ending, the lower their incidence of depression and the better their immune markers. Here, Prospection fuels not just motivation, but existential resilience. If the science is persuasive, practical readers ask what to do Monday morning. The first prescription is embarrassingly simple. Spend 5 minutes each dawn rehearsing the most consequential moment you expect before dusk. Make the mental film multisensory. Hear the slide deck. Applause, feel the handshake's temperature, smell the bakery air. If the moment involves signing a cafe lease, then identify one threat to that outcome and write the if-then plan that will neutralize it. Executives sometimes call the maneuver a premortem. Imagine the project died, uncover the cause, vaccinate against it. The second prescription is to anchor bigger ambitions in the calendar, as though they have already happened. On whichever app you use for appointments, drop a note exactly 30 days forward that reads, "Hooray, you just ran 100 kilometers this month." The note will surface whether you remember it or not, lending your future self a megaphone. The third prescription is quarterly dialogue. With a carefully described future identity, open a document titled Letter from July 2030 and let that version of you narrate how life feels. Do not edit for plausibility. The goal is not prophecy, but intimacy across time. Skeptics point out the dark side of anticipatory cognition. Rumination about catastrophic futures fuels anxiety disorders. Obsessive rehearsal of negative possibilities can freeze decision-making. Clinical data confirm the risk. Yet therapeutic protocols that harness prospection rather than suppress it are emerging. Cognitive behavioral therapy for social anxiety, for example, teaches clients to replace automatically feared future scenes with balanced probability estimates and coping scripts. A shy graduate student who imagines humiliating herself during a conference presentation learns to picture delivering the talk, stumbling on one slide, receiving polite applause nonetheless. and chatting comfortably afterward. The future scene is not sanitized but contextualized, restoring agency. Similarly, acceptance and commitment therapy invites patients to clarify long-term values, parental love, artistic contribution, and then treat intrusive thoughts as temporary weather on the journey toward value-consistent behavior. Ethical worries also surface beyond the clinic. Advertisers routinely exploit our predictive machinery, promising futures of glamour, slimness, or social belonging if we choose their product. Politicians craft utopian or dystopian visions to nudge electorates. Awareness of the bias does not immunize us, but deliberate prospection practice can raise the threshold for manipulation. A consumer who maintains her own vivid, self-generated image of financial independence at 65 is slightly less susceptible to a luxury car commercial that equates retirement with leather upholstery. By building bespoke futures, we reduce the mind's hunger for borrowed ones. Philosophers of free will find prospection illuminating because it offers a middle path between fatalism and randomness. If choices are only the echoes of past conditioning, moral responsibility dissolves. If they are brute caprice, responsibility fares no better. But if choices spring from simulations crafted by the agent, realigned in light of values, updated when prediction error strikes, then agency survives scrutiny. We write the menu of imagined paths, test their emotional flavors, and finally pick aware that if disappointments ensue, we can rewrite tomorrow's menu. In that revision process, the past is not erased, it is consulted as a library. The library houses examples of what once worked, what hurt, what delighted, and we sample its shelves whenever we need ingredients for new fantasies. Yet the meal is cooked for the appetite ahead, not the one behind. Viewed through prospection, culture itself looks like a collective dream laboratory. Science fiction sees technological invention by depicting futures that engineers reverse engineer into blueprints. Political constitutions enshrine pictures of just societies and invite citizens to approximate them. Religions sculpt ultimate destinations, heaven, nirvana, an earthly kingdom of peace, and thereby coax adherents toward present altruism. Even calendar rituals such as New Year's resolutions or birthday wishes operate as communal prompts to imagine alternative selves. We celebrate, in effect, an annual festival of negotiated tomorrow. One might worry that unchecked forecasting breeds disappointment, that every horizon conquers reveals another horizon receding, yet a series of longitudinal studies tracking college students from freshman year to midlife shows that those with the most flexible future narratives, willing to revise yet unwilling to relinquish direction, report the greatest overall life satisfaction decades later. What drags happiness down is not future thinking per se, but unexamined oscillation between contradictory futures or clinging to outdated ones no longer aligned with values. Prospection done well is iterative imagine, act, observe, edit, imagine again. The COVID-19 pandemic offered a global case study. Lockdowns shattered near-term expectations, canceling weddings, commencements, business launches. People with brittle single-path futures suffered acutely. Those practiced at scenario planning pivoted. A restaurateur who had daydreamed multiple expansion stories converted a dining hall into a meal kit warehouse within weeks. A teacher who had rehearsed the possibility of remote credentials launched a global tutoring service online. Surveys taken in 2021 indicated that individuals who engaged in deliberate positive future visualization during the crisis maintained higher hope scores and lower clinical depression indices than those who clung chiefly to nostalgia for 2019. The data underline that prospection is not optimism detached from reality. It is adaptive scanning of branching timelines and commitment to one branch while reserving the right to jump should information shift. Yet how do we ensure that our mental timelines retain enough accuracy to be useful? The answer lies in systematic feedback. Implementation intention researchers advise annotating each if-then plan with a review date. If a weekly plan fails, dissect whether the imagined obstacle was misidentified or whether the remedial action proved insufficient. That autopsy then feeds the hippocampal library, refining the next prospective cycle. The literature on deliberate practice, popularized by Anders Ericsson, likewise emphasizes future-oriented micro-goals with immediate feedback loops. The violinist aims to master a 4-bar passage by Thursday's lesson, hears the instructor's critique, imagines Friday's improvement, and repeats. The distinction between rehearsal and reality thereby blurs, melding into a seamless gradient of anticipatory correction. Corporate strategists have begun to adopt similar neurological insights. Traditional 5-year plans too often ossify by year 2, the market has mutated. Firms now experiment with living roadmaps, reviewed quarterly, anchored by a vivid story of the customer experience. 5 years out yet subdivided into prompt, testable bets. Amazon's practice of writing the future press release, drafting the news article that will announce a product launch years hence, captures the technique. Teams walk backwards from the fictional headline to design specifications, then forward again as conditions warrant. Successive rewrites are not admissions of failure, but healthy pivots. Because the future pull model rests on simulation, language plays an outsized role. Words paint the vision, invite social commitment, and encode plans. Neuroscientists observe that inner speech activates motor areas as though rehearsing the action verbally primes the body. A sentence such as, "I will jog at dawn," read aloud sets off a cascade of subtle muscle activations connected to running, orienting the organism toward implementation when dawn arrives. The effectiveness of public commitments on behavior change derives partly from this embodied rehearsal. Telling friends about the marathon recruits the neuromuscular and social brain simultaneously. Storytelling thus becomes a lightweight exoskeleton supporting intentions until habits form. Education systems can harness or stifle the same energy. Curricula anchored entirely in historical chronology risk, implying that students march from past to present like passengers on a conveyor belt. Pedagogies of design thinking flip orientation outward, begin with a desired future state, clean water for the village, carbon-neutral housing, and invite learners to prototype solutions now. Early experiments in such curricula report spikes in engagement among adolescents who previously felt alienated by textbook recitation. The lesson scales down to household parenting. When a child faces a daunting assignment, asking, "What will it feel like Friday night when this is finished?" taps Prospection's motivational core better than scolding about missed past deadlines. It is tempting to conclude that embracing Prospection requires permanent positivity. The data say otherwise. Effective future simulation incorporates risk and pain. Entrepreneurs whose business plans include modeled downturns survive longer. Soldiers in resilience training improve performance when instructors guide them through worst-case rehearsal, followed by coping imagery. The crucial factor is controllability. Imagining an unstoppable apocalypse triggers helplessness. Visualizing severe difficulties met with prepared tactics trains prefrontal circuits to remain online during stress. The age-old Stoic practice of premeditatio malorum, mentally rehearsing adversity to defang it, is a Prospection hack stretching back 2 millennia. One might still ask, is the brain unique in this anticipatory talent? Or do other animals navigate by futures too? Ethologists concede that squirrels hoard nuts and bees dance vectors predicting nectar. Yet only humans appear to build nested horizons, spanning weeks, months, and decades, and to communicate those horizons culturally so that descendants inherit unrealized dreams. We are Homo prospectus, the tomorrow creature. Seligman's team argues that language itself evolved primarily to exchange future plans. Let's hunt at dawn by the river, not to reminisce. The archaeological record supports the claim complex tools require foresight, coordination, and trust in deferred payoff. With the engine metaphor restored, the opening image of night driving acquires one more nuance. The headlights are self-generated, they reach only so far, but they pivot wherever your steering wheel turns. You cannot illuminate the full journey curves, landslides, detours await, but you can keep expanding the halo by accelerating and updating. The guardrails of feedback prevent plunges into ravines. The rear-view mirror remains useful, reflecting lessons, scenic memories, fleeting regrets. Yet if you stare into it too long, the car drifts. Better to glance, adjust, and refocus on the ribbon of possibility arcing out of darkness. To live Prospection consciously is therefore to write, revise, and inhabit personal science fiction, grounded in empirical humility, but animated by meaning. 3,000 words later, the implication should be clear: craft the story of next week's triumph, stage direct the satisfaction of next month's milestone, script the accolades of next year's self. Let those scenes whisper instructions to your limbs. When obstacles loom, imagine them conquered and staple the image to an if-then clause. When setbacks strike, harvest them as fuel for the sequel. Time in this frame is not the tyrant that erodes our potential, but the canvas we paint upon in advance. The past is the archive, the future is the engine, and you, by virtue of evolved neural architecture and deliberate creative choice, are the engineer who sets the throttle.